because our brother's not here. DMX, you know, rest in peace. You know, we formed like a brotherhood. I didn't have to see him. I didn't have to call him. He didn't have to call me. When we saw each other though, it was that. Right there. It was that. It was beyond.
Okay, I see what's really good. You're trying to eliminate the competition. You know, because at first you retire, you know, then get me off the label. Now you're back rapping again.
Nis didn't just randomly speak out. He finally reached his breaking point for years. He's been quiet while watching how certain things in the industry always seemed to lean in Jay-Z's favor, even when the odds weren't in his favor. But now, with the passing of DMX and the resurfacing of old industry secrets, Nis is laying it all on the table. He's not doing it for clout, not for drama. He's doing it because the truth deserves to be heard. And according to Nis, what's been happening behind the scenes in hip-hop for over 2 decades hasn't been a coincidence. It's been a long, calculated strategy of control, sabotage, and reputation building, and he says Jay-Z has been right. At the center of it all started with subtle moves. Little things like Jay-Z dropping albums on the same day as Nis, or releasing surprise projects right when another artist had a big moment lined up. Most people brushed it off as regular industry competition, but when the same pattern repeats over and over, year after year, people start to look deeper. Nis says that's exactly what Jay-Z has been doing, not competing, but eliminating competition before it could even take root. It wasn't just him who was targeted either. DMX, Beanie Sigel, Cameron, and even artists within Jay's own circle were pushed aside the moment they showed potential to threaten Jay's throne. Nis says one of the biggest examples of this came when DMX was preparing to release his 6th album. At that time, Jay-Z had stepped into a powerful executive role at Def Jam. DMX, who had carried the label on his back for years, suddenly found himself being sidelined. Delays, confusion, and lack of support from the label began to weigh on X. Eventually, it became clear that Jay-Z, who once called DMX a brother, was pulling strings to prevent the album from seeing the success it deserved. Why? Because X was still one of the few artists who could outsell Jay and make the charts look shaky. Instead of going head-to-head, Nis says Jay pulled the rug out from under him quietly. It wasn't just about dropping albums at the same time or stealing headlines. According to Nis, Jay-Z's tactics were deeper. He'd wait until the buzz around another artist reached its peak, and then strike with something massive. Take Nis's own experience with his album Nasser, which had been produced by Kanye West and was supposed to mark a powerful return. Just one day after that release, Jay-Z and Beyoncé came out of nowhere and dropped Everything Is Love, with a full music video already shot at the Louvre in Paris. The timing wasn't just suspected, it was surgical. That wasn't an accident. That was a move designed to snatch attention and control the narrative. Nis says it's not the first time either. Back when he released Stillmatic, Jay dropped his MTV Unplugged performance just a week later. When Nis put out Street's Disciple, Jay dropped Collision Course with Linkin Park, Nis's greatest hits. Jay answered with American Gangster, The Lost Tapes too. Here comes Beyoncé with the Lion King soundtrack. Time and time again, Jay-Z waited until Nis made a move and then responded in a way that forced the spotlight back on himself. And with each move, Jay didn't just compete, he smothered. He took the oxygen out of the room, leaving no space for the other artists to shine. But it wasn't only about Nis or DMX. Beanie Sigel told his side too. He talked about how every time he was set to release something big, Jay would suddenly drop something of his own. It was like clockwork. Cameron had the same story. He was on 106 in Park, getting ready for his big promo push when Jay-Z unexpectedly appeared on the same show and took over the spotlight. These weren't random accidents. These were power plays made by someone who wasn't just trying to win, he was trying to dominate the board by any means necessary. What made things even more complicated was Beyoncé's role in all this. Nis wasn't attacking her personally, but he did point out how Jay often used her image as a shield anytime Jay-Z did something questionable. People focus on Beyoncé's perfection instead, her flawless public persona, her global fanbase, and her role as a symbol of black excellence made it nearly impossible for critics to call Jay out without getting attacked. Nis said it's like hiding in plain sight, do something shady behind the scenes, but wrap it in Beyoncé's shine and people will either ignore it or defend it blindly. DMX saw it too. He called it out way before anyone else had the courage. X said Jay didn't want real competition. When Jay got control of Def Jam, X's music started getting pushed aside. The same DMX who had 5 straight #1 albums, who held down the streets, who brought rawness and authenticity to the game, was suddenly being treated like he didn't matter. That hurt. And when X passed, Jay came out trying to make it sound like it was all love. But Nas said that wasn't true. The love might have been real in the beginning, but the moves that came later were anything but. The craziest part is that even when Jay-Z knew what was happening with artists like R. Kelly, people who were facing serious accusations, he stayed silent. Nas said Jay could have spoken up, but he didn't. Instead, he kept quiet, protected the money, and only shifted his image when it was safe to do so. When the backlash against R. Kelly exploded, Jay suddenly got involved in the Surviving R. Kelly documentary. That was strategic. It allowed him to clean up his image, distance himself from controversy, and appear like an ally instead of someone who had once benefited from staying silent. And Niz? He didn't forget. That's why now, after all these years, he's finally pulling back the curtain. He's showing the fans how deep the manipulation went. It wasn't just business, it was personal. Nas said that Jay would act friendly, call him dog, and tell him everything was good, but the moment Nas turned around, he'd drop an album, block a release, or outshine him with a surprise project. That's not friendship. That's strategy. Rooted in fear. Fear that someone else might rise and challenge the legacy that Jay's been carefully building. Piece by piece, even Jay's image as a businessman and mogul has come under new light. Nas, 50 Cent, and others have pointed out how Jay's biggest accolades started pouring in after he married Beyoncé. Suddenly, the Grammys doubled, the invitations to elite circles increased, and the narrative shifted from street rapper to polished billionaire. Was that growth? Sure, but Nas says it was also optics. A carefully crafted storyline that ignored all the people who had to be stepped on to make it happen. Now, in hindsight, fans are looking at Jay-Z's career with different eyes. The blueprint he used to rise wasn't just about lyrical skills or musical innovation. It was also about timing, manipulation, and using personal relationships as stepping stones. Nas never played that game. DMX never played it. And that's why their voices still carry so much weight today. They weren't afraid to speak the truth, even if it made people uncomfortable. And now that Nas is talking, the industry is finally starting to listen. This isn't about starting new beef, it's about truth. Nas isn't trying to tear down Jay-Z's empire, he's just saying it didn't rise the way people think it did. Behind the scenes, moves were made to block, delay, and destroy. And a lot of those moves were aimed at people who had the potential to shine just as bright. Whether it was Beanie, Cameron, DMX, or Nas himself, anyone who looked like they were catching up had their moment interrupted. Not by chance, but by design. And now that the fans have access to timelines, interviews, and receipts, the patterns are clearer than ever. It's not just a coincidence when you see Jay-Z releasing something within days of Nas every single time. It's not just smart marketing when a visual album appears out of nowhere the day after Nas drops. It's not just luck when artists around Jay suddenly disappear from the spotlight while he rises higher. It's chess, and according to Nas, Jay's been moving pawns for decades while hiding behind the queen that is Beyoncé. What Nas is doing now is setting the record straight, not with diss tracks, not with internet rants, but by calmly breaking down the timeline and showing people how the industry really works. Jay didn't just want to be the best, he wanted to be the only one at the top. And to do that, he had to make sure no one else even had a chance. Whether that meant pulling rank at Def Jam, surprise dropping albums, or hijacking someone else's promo run, it was all part of the same plan. And the most painful part, the artists who suffered the most were often the ones closest to him. People like Beanie, who considered Jay a brother, DMX, who thought there was mutual respect, Nas, who tried to stay in his own lane and still got caught in the crossfire. These weren't strangers, these were peers, brothers, allies. But when power is on the line, friendships often come second. Now the industry is at a crossroads. More and more artists are speaking up. The old loyalty to silence is fading, and fans are waking up to the reality that not everything in hip-hop is about talent or timing. Sometimes it's about who's pulling the strings behind the curtain. Nas is saying it plainly now. Jay-Z didn't just rise to power, he made sure no one else could. And he did it while the world was too busy watching Beyoncé's glow to notice what was happening in the shadows. This isn't the end of the story. If anything, it's the beginning of a new chapter where people start asking the hard questions, where they stop accepting the polished surface and start digging into what lies beneath. Nas has spoken. DMX spoke. Before him, and now, it's up to the rest of the industry to decide if they'll keep playing the game or finally start rewriting the rules, and when you look at the timeline laid out so clearly, it becomes harder and harder to deny that this was all just innocent coincidence. Nez wasn't the only one who felt the pressure. He just happens to be the one now brave enough and seasoned enough to tell the truth without fear of what it could cost him, because after surviving decades in an industry built on competition and ego, Nez has nothing left to prove and no one to impress. He's earned his legacy the hard way without using shortcuts, favors, or strategic sabotage. And now, he's pulling back the curtain so others don't get caught in the same cycle. Even artists who never had direct beef with Jay have started to connect the dots. Think about J. Cole. Think about Kendrick Lamar. Think about how long it took them to rise through the ranks despite having undeniable talent and consistent impact. The top has always been a tight circle, and according to Nez, it's not because there were worthy challengers, it's because certain people worked hard to make sure that circle stayed small, controlled, easy to manage, safe for a certain narrative. And then there's the Grammy effect. Nez and others have pointed out how Jay-Z's award wins seem to multiply after aligning with Beyoncé publicly. Again, it's not about discrediting her talent. Beyoncé is undeniably one of the greatest performers of our time. But what's being said here is deeper. It's about how the industry plays favorites and creates illusions of success through affiliations rather than solely merit. When Beyoncé and Jay-Z became the royal couple of music, the industry began to treat them like untouchable icons, making it impossible for fair competition to even exist. Suddenly, award shows, magazine covers, brand deals, and media attention all started revolving around them. And anyone who tried to challenge that balance was quietly nudged aside or overshadowed entirely. Jay's business moves are also a huge part of the story. The Roc Nation empire, the partnerships with luxury brands, the streaming service wars on the surface, it all looks like ambition and entrepreneurship. But Nez hints that behind those boardroom deals are political moves designed to secure dominance and keep others from catching up. Look at how Jay tried to push Tidal as the artist-friendly alternative to Spotify. That narrative had power, but then, conveniently, when Nez dropped his album through Tidal, it mysteriously glitched and didn't release properly for almost 24 hours. The question then becomes who really benefits from those glitches? And then we talk about loyalty or the lack of it. Nez isn't just talking about public competition. He's talking about betrayal from people who pretended to be allies. That's what makes this so personal. Jay didn't move like an opponent. He moved like a friend until the perfect moment arrived to pull the rug. That's why the pain behind these revelations cuts deeper. It's not just industry drama, it's broken trust. Artists like DMX, who fought their way to the top with grit and hard, were quietly maneuvered out of the spotlight. And for what? To protect someone else's image? To shield one man's legacy? Let's not forget how Jay-Z's narrative changed when he married Beyoncé. Before her, Jay was respected but not universally beloved. He had street credibility, but was still seen as rough around the edges. A former drug dealer turned rapper. After the marriage, suddenly he was rebranded as the ultimate family man. People stopped asking questions. They stopped holding him accountable for industry beefs, past behavior, or shady dealings. Beyoncé's perfection became a protective shield that repelled criticism, allowing Jay to re-enter any space, whether political, business, or artistic, without pushback. Nez sees this and calls it out for what it is, not just rebranding, but hiding in plain sight. When Nez reflects on the history of hip-hop, he sees how much has changed. The culture used to be built on authenticity, battle, and standing on your own defeat, but somewhere along the way, it shifted to manipulation, control, and behind-the-scenes sabotage. And while Jay-Z might be at the top of that pyramid now, it didn't come without collateral damage. Nez isn't bitter, he's just honest. He knows how the game works, and he knows who's been pulling the strings. And the saddest part in all of this, DMX never got to fully speak his truth. He gave hints, told stories, and exposed a few things before he passed. But now that he's gone, his voice is being used by others to show just how deep these industry games really went. Nez is carrying the torch not just for himself, but for X and for every artist who got played, blocked, or pushed aside because they were too real or too raw for the mainstream. Even newer artists are feeling the effects. The industry hasn't changed, it's just gotten slicker. Now, the blocking happens through digital platforms, PR campaigns, and silent blackballing. You don't see it unless you know what to look for, but Nez does. He's seen it all. And by finally speaking up, he's giving other artists permission to do the same. This entire saga is more than just a beef or a rivalry. It's a reflection of how power is used and Abuse in music. Jay-Z might have started out as the underdog, the hustler who made it. But along the way, he became the gatekeeper, and now, there's a saying it's time to call that out. It's time for transparency. Time to stop hiding behind curated images and start owning the truth. Even 50 Cent never wanted to bite his tongue said something similar. He mentioned how Jay-Z's marriage to Beyoncé opened up doors that were previously closed. It gave him access to circles that respect image over authenticity. And once Jay-Z got through those doors, he made sure not many others followed, Ms. agrees.